They called her the useless fat girl of high society. But when her own father handed her over to an Apache warrior as punishment, no one could have predicted that she would find the purest love that had ever existed. In the golden halls of the Vasquez de Coronado mansion, where crystal chandeliers reflected the grandeur of one of the most powerful families in Mexico in 1847, lived Maria, a 24-year-old whose name starkly contrasted with that of the flawless women around her. Her hefty figure, round cheeks, and honey-colored eyes had been a source of family shame since she turned 15 and failed to attract any suitors during her debut in society. "Look at her gorging on sweets again," her mother, Doña Isabel, would whisper from the marble balcony overlooking the garden. "A young lady of her status should have more self-control." The words fell on Maria's heart like poison, already wounded by years of cruel judgment. She had learned to find solace in her grandmother's books and in the candies she secretly stole from the pantry when no one was looking. Don Tanes Vasquez de Coronado, a 60-year-old man whose graying hair spoke of decades spent building the family empire, watched his daughter from the window of his study with a mix of disappointment and cold calculation. His other 5 children had married into advantageous families, expanding both their fortune and their political power. But Maria, his only daughter, had become a burden that grew heavier with every year she remained unmarried. The night of the grand season ball arrived as a last-ditch, desperate opportunity. Doña Isabel had ordered the most expensive dress money could buy, royal blue silk embroidered with gold thread, hoping the opulence of the gown would distract from her daughter's bulky frame. But when Maria descended the marble staircase into the main hall, the whispers and pitying glances were like daggers, each one piercing deeper into her soul. "Who would want to dance with that whale?" murmured Lord Charles Salvatierra, not even bothering to lower his voice. His words were met with nervous chuckles from other young members of high society, who cruelly found entertainment in Maria's humiliation. The young woman felt as though the marble floor would swallow her whole, but she held her composure, a product of years of aristocratic education. Throughout the evening, Maria stayed seated next to the older matrons, watching as the other girls her age danced gracefully with suitors who would never glance her way. Her mother-of-pearl fan trembled slightly in her hands as she forced a dignified smile. Though inside, she was falling apart, piece by piece. When the ball finally ended and the family made their way home in their gilded carriage, the silence was louder than any scolding could have been. The following day, Don Thomas summoned his daughter to his study. The walls lined with law books and maps of their vast estates bore silent witness to the conversation that would forever change Maria's fate. The man paced back and forth, his mahogany cane tapping rhythmically on the wooden floor as he searched for the right words to express his frustration. "Maria," he began, finally turning to face her, "you're 24. At your age, your mother had already given birth to 3 children and solidified alliances that greatly benefited this family. But you," he trailed off, gesturing vaguely toward her, "you've turned out to be a failed investment, a disgrace to the Vasquez de Coronado name." These words hit Maria like a hammer. She had heard variations of this speech for years, but never so bluntly. Her fists clenched in her lap as she struggled to maintain her composure. "I've decided that it's time to find a final solution to your situation. Tomorrow, a prisoner will arrive at the military fort, an Apache warrior captured during the latest skirmishes at the border. The authorities have accepted my proposal. You will be given to this savage as his companion. At least then you will serve some purpose, keeping a dangerous prisoner under control." Maria's world tilted. For a moment she thought she had misheard. "Father," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious," he replied, his tone cold as ice. "I can no longer afford to keep a daughter who contributes nothing to this family. At least this way your existence will have some meaning. You'll keep the Apache from being executed, and you'll finally have a husband, even if he's a savage." Maria stood slowly, feeling as though she were floating outside of her own body. She whispered, "You're selling me to a prisoner of war." "I'm giving you a chance to be useful for the first time in your life," Don Thomas retorted, his voice devoid of any compassion. "The Apache's name is Talak. Tomorrow, you'll be taken to the reservation that has been designated for him. Consider this your arranged marriage, just with someone of your level." That night, as Maria packed her few personal belongings into a leather trunk, she cried for the first time in years. But amid the tears of pain and humiliation, something unexpected began to grow within her, a strange feeling of liberation. For the first time in her life, she would be free from the disdainful glances, the cruel comments, the constant feeling of being a living disappointment. At the break of dawn, when the carriage rolled away from the family mansion, taking her towards the unknown, Maria did not look back. She didn't know it yet, but she was headed towards an encounter that would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. The Apache land stretched beneath the relentless sun like a place forgotten by God, where red rocks contrasted against the deep blue sky, and the wind carried stories of freedom and resistance. Talak had been brought here not as punishment, but as part of a Mexican government experiment. The goal was to establish reservations where captured warriors could live in controlled peace, rather than be executed. The experiment also included providing them with Mexican wives to civilize them and produce mixed offspring that would be easier to control. When the dusty carriage stopped in front of the adobe hut that would become her new home, Maria stepped out, her legs shaking and her heart pounding like a war drum. The desert air was unlike anything she had ever known. Dry, hot, and charged with a wild energy that made her feel oddly alive. Her silk skirts, so fitting for the ballrooms of the city, looked absurdly out of place against this barren landscape. Talak emerged from the shadow of the hut like a figure from legend. He was 30 years old, tall and strong, with skin darkened by the desert sun and black hair that fell to his shoulders. His dark eyes carried the depth of someone who had seen both glory and tragedy. And when he locked eyes with Maria, she felt as though she were being assessed by a judge who saw beyond her superficial appearance.
"Is this the woman they've sent me?" he asked, his Spanish clear though accented, as he addressed the captain who had escorted Maria. His voice carried a tone of disbelief, and Maria's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Do you think I'm going to accept someone they've handed over like a dog thrown a bone?" The captain, an older man accustomed to dealing with rebellious prisoners, hardened his expression. "You have no choice, Apache. This woman is part of the deal. You'll treat her with respect, or you'll be sent back to military prison." His words hung in the air like a threat both prisoners understood clearly. Maria finally found her voice after a long silence. "I didn't ask to be here," she declared, her words firm and without self-pity, surprising even herself. "But here we are, both of us, so we'll have to find a way to make this work." Her words were direct, and Lalok regarded her with new interest. After the captain left, raising a cloud of dust behind him, Maria and Lalok were left alone in front of the hut, two strangers bound together by circumstances neither had chosen. The silence between them stretched out like the desert itself, vast, uncomfortable, but full of unexplored possibilities. "I'm not going to pretend this is a real marriage," Lalok said, crossing his arms over his bare chest. "You're a product of the Mexican government, another way for them to humiliate me even more than they already have." His words were harsh but not cruel, as if he were simply setting the ground rules for their forced cohabitation. "I understand," Maria responded, surprising herself with how calm she sounded. "I didn't choose this either. My family sent me here to get rid of me. I guess we're both prisoners in different ways." It was the first time she had spoken so clearly about her situation, and there was an unexpected sense of freedom in it. The first few days were a delicate dance of avoiding conflict. Tlaloc would leave early to hunt and tend to the small crops he had started, while Maria stayed in the cabin, exploring her new surroundings and trying to adjust to a life completely different from anything she had known. The cabin was simple but functional: 2 separate rooms, a stone fireplace in the kitchen, and handmade furniture that reflected the craftsmanship of a warrior. It was when Maria found the medicinal herbs drying in the kitchen that she discovered her first point of connection with her forced companion. She immediately recognized several plants her grandmother had taught her to identify from the gardens of their family mansion: chamomile to calm the nerves, comfrey to heal wounds, willow to ease pain. Without thinking, she began to rearrange the herbs by their healing properties. When Tlaloc returned that afternoon and saw what she had done, he stopped dead in his tracks. "How do you know about herbal medicine?" he asked, stepping closer to examine her work. His voice had lost the hostile tone from the earlier days. "My grandmother was a healer before she married my grandfather. She taught me in secret because my mother thought it wasn't appropriate for a young lady of society. But I've always been fascinated by the idea of helping people heal." For the first time since her arrival, Tlaloc looked at her with something like respect. "These plants are what I use to treat home injuries and minor illnesses," he said slowly, as if carefully weighting his next words. "But there are some I don't know how to prepare properly. Could you teach me?" That simple question marked the beginning of a subtle but profound change in their relationship. Over the following weeks, Maria and Tlaloc spent their afternoons working together with the medicinal plants. He taught her about the specific properties of desert herbs, while she shared the preparation techniques she had learned from her grandmother. Their hands occasionally brushed as they made salves and tinctures, creating accidental moments of intimacy neither knew how to interpret. One afternoon, while preparing a cream for sunburns, Maria ventured to ask a personal question. "Did you have a family before you were captured?" she asked softly, not looking up from her work. Tlaloc stood still for a long moment. "I had a wife," he finally said, his voice heavy with sadness, and Maria's heart tightened. "Her name was Itzel. She died during a Mexican army raid on our village. That's why I became so reckless in battle. I had nothing left to lose." Maria raised her eyes and saw the raw pain in the warrior's gaze. Without thinking, she reached out and gently touched his hand. "I'm so sorry," she murmured. "She must have been a very special woman to inspire that much love." "She was," he replied, not moving his hand away. "She was small, delicate, always smiling. The complete opposite of—" He stopped abruptly, realizing what he was about to say. "The complete opposite of me," Maria finished, with a sad smile, but without bitterness. "Don't worry. I know exactly what kind of woman I am and what I'm not. I've lived with that reality all my life." Tlaloc studied her with a new intensity. "Did your family treat you badly?" he asked directly. "They treated me like a constant disappointment," Maria answered, with brutal honesty. "For as long as I can remember, I've been the fat daughter who is good for nothing. My only value was the name I carried, and not even that was enough to find me a husband." She shrugged, acceptance in her voice that had taken years of pain to develop. That night, as they each retreated to their separate rooms, as they had done since their arrival, both carried with them a new understanding. They had started to see each other not as strangers forced to coexist, but as two wounded people who might just find solace in each other's company. The months that followed brought subtle yet deep changes to both the desert and to the hearts of its inhabitants. Maria had planted a small medicinal garden behind the cabin, where she cultivated the herbs best suited for the arid climate.
Her hands, once soft and pampered as befitted a society lady, were now calloused from work and stained with dirt, but never had they felt more useful. The physical transformation of Maria was clear to anyone who had known her before. The constant work under the desert sun had bronzed her skin and strengthened her body. She had lost weight naturally, not from the strict diets her mother had imposed, but from the active life and simple, nourishing food. But more important than any physical change was the new light in her eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt truly useful. Apache warriors from nearby tribes had begun to come to her when they had wounds or illnesses that the traditional healers couldn't treat. Maria had developed a reputation as a healer who blended Apache ancestral knowledge with Mexican medicinal techniques, creating more effective treatments than either tradition alone could provide. "The white woman of the desert can heal what others cannot," the warriors would say when they returned to their tribes. And although some elders remained skeptical of a Mexican healer, the results spoke for themselves. Children with dangerous fevers recovered completely under her care. Warriors with infected wounds returned to battle. Women with chronic pain found relief for the first time in years. Tlaloc watched these changes with a mixture of pride and something deeper that he didn't dare name. The woman who had arrived months ago as a government-imposed burden had become an indispensable presence, not just in his life, but in the whole community. With every passing day, he found more reasons to admire her strength, compassion, and adaptability. One full moon night, while Maria prepared a tincture to treat the arthritis of an Apache elder, Tlaloc approached, carrying 2 cups of herbal tea he had learned to make under her guidance. The ritual of sharing tea at the end of the day had become their favorite moment, when they talked about everything and nothing while the desert turned silver beneath the moonlight. "Do you miss your old life?" he asked, sitting down on the wooden bench he had built specifically for these moments. It was a question he had wanted to ask for weeks, but had never found the right moment. Maria stopped grinding the herbs and looked up at the stars, shining like diamonds in the infinite sky. "I miss my grandmother," she said thoughtfully. "She was the only one in my family who ever saw me as more than a disappointment." She paused, searching for the right words. "No, I don't miss feeling useless every day. I don't miss the pitying glances or the cruel comments. Here, for the first time in my life, I feel like I have a purpose." Tlaloc studied her profile in the moonlight. The months of desert life had transformed not just her appearance, but her entire presence. Where he had once seen a defeated woman, he now saw a quiet warrior who had found her battlefield in the art of healing. "I miss my old life," he admitted. "I miss the freedom to ride through the mountains without restrictions, to hunt wherever I wanted, to live according to the traditions of my ancestors." I paused, his voice softening. "But I don't miss the loneliness. For a long time after losing Itzel, I thought I would be alone forever, that a part of me had died with her." Maria turned toward him, feeling as if they were stepping into dangerous emotional territory. "And now?" she asked softly. "Now, I wake up every morning, hoping to see you working in your garden. I look forward to our nightly conversations. I look forward to watching how you help heal my people. You've brought something into my life that I thought I had lost forever." He paused, struggling with words he never thought he'd speak. "You've brought Maria." The name hung between them like a revelation. Maria felt tears running down her cheeks, but for the first time in years, they were tears of joy. "Tlelak," she murmured, but before she could say more, he slowly approached, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her with a tenderness that shocked her. The kiss was gentle, reverent, full of months of mutual respect and growing understanding. When they parted, Maria trembled, not from fear, but from an emotion so intense it threatened to overwhelm her. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "I'm everything your first wife wasn't. You are you," he interrupted firmly. "You're not Itzel, and I'm not trying to replace her. You're Maria, the woman who saved my soul when I thought I had lost it forever, the woman who found her strength in the desert and taught me that love can bloom in the most unexpected places." The following months were the happiest either of them had ever known. Their relationship deepened naturally, built on a solid foundation of mutual respect, admiration, and shared purpose. Maria moved through the cabin with a grace she had never possessed in the ballrooms of society. Tlelak smiled more frequently than he ever had, surprising the warriors who visited him. They worked together in perfect harmony. He would go hunting and gather plants, while Maria tended to the patients who came every day. In the afternoons, they prepared medicines together, their movements synchronized like a dance they had perfected through practice. The nights were spent under the stars, talking, laughing, discovering new facets of each other. "My tribe needs to establish new trade routes," Tlelak confided one evening as they watched the stars. "The medicines you prepare could be traded for tools and food we need. You could help not only heal bodies, but heal the relationships between our peoples." Maria felt a deep emotion as she heard these words. The idea that her work could have an impact beyond individual patients gave her a sense of purpose she never thought possible. "Do you think the other tribes will accept me?" she asked with a mixture of hope and nervousness. "Yes, they have already. The results speak for themselves. But there's something else I need to tell you." His expression turned serious. "I've received messages from my older brother. He's considering forming a formal alliance between several Apache tribes, and he wants me to be part of the negotiations."
Maria's heart sped up. The prospect of greater freedom was exciting, but also terrifying. "What does that mean for us?" she asked. Tlelak took her hands in his. "It means we could have a real marriage, according to the traditions of my people. It means you could officially become my wife, not just a government assignment." His eyes shone with an intensity that made her tremble. "It means we could start a family if we wish." The word family resonated in Maria's heart like a bell. After years of being deemed useless because she couldn't bear children in her previous arranged marriage, the possibility of creating a family based on true love felt like a miracle. But her happiness was suddenly interrupted when riders appeared on the horizon. Tlelak immediately went on high alert, recognizing the Mexican army uniforms from a distance. "Hide in the cabin," he murmured urgently. "Something's not right." But it was too late. The soldiers had seen them, and among them was a figure that froze Maria's blood in her veins. Her own brother, Rodrigo Vázquez de Coronado, accompanied by the captain who had brought her here months ago. Rodrigo dismounted from his horse with the arrogance typical of someone who had grown up believing the world owed him obedience. At 28, he was the perfect image of a Mexican high society gentleman, immaculately dressed even in the desert, with a carefully trimmed mustache and cold eyes that had inherited the calculated cruelty of their father. But when he saw his sister emerge from the cabin, his expression shifted from controlled disgust to absolute shock. The woman approaching was not the obese and defeated sister he had remembered. Maria walked with a natural dignity she never possessed in the halls of the family mansion. Her sun-kissed skin glowed with health, her body had grown strong and proportionate, and her eyes held a light of purpose Rodrigo had never seen. But what disturbed him most was the way Tulalok positioned himself protectively at her side and how she accepted that protection with ease. "Maria," Rodrigo said in a controlled but tense voice, "I've come to take you home. This experiment has gone on long enough." "This is my home," Maria responded calmly, gesturing to the cabin and the medicinal garden that she had created. "And I'm not going anywhere." Her voice was firm, without a trace of the insecurity that had defined all her years in the family mansion. The military captain stepped forward holding up official documents. "Mrs. Vasquez de Coronado, we have received reports that you are being held against your will." "As a Mexican citizen, you have the right to return to civilization," the captain declared. Tulalok tensed visibly. "No one is holding her here," he said in clear Spanish. "She is here by her own choice." His hand instinctively moved toward the knife at his belt, but Maria gently touched his arm to calm him. "It's true," she confirmed, speaking directly to the captain. "I'm here because I found a purpose and a life worth living. I don't need to be rescued from happiness." Rodrigo stepped forward, eyeing his sister with a mixture of triumph and what could have been reluctant respect. "Look at what you have become," he muttered, his voice filled with judgment. "Dressed like a savage, living in a hut, working with your hands like a common Indian. Is this what you call happiness?" "Yes," Maria answered without hesitation. "I call happiness waking up every morning knowing my life has value. I call happiness helping to heal people, being respected for my skills instead of being despised for my appearance. I call happiness being with a man who loves me for who I am, not for the last name I carry." Her words hit the desert silence like bombs. Rodrigo exchanged a meaningful glance with the captain. "It's clear they've brainwashed you," he finally declared. "Father sent me with specific instructions. If you don't come willingly, I have orders to take you by force." Tulalok stepped forward, his imposing presence filling the space between the soldiers and Maria. "You'll have to kill me first," he declared with the quiet certainty of a warrior who had faced death many times. "That can be arranged," Rodrigo replied coldly, signaling the soldiers who were with him. 6 armed men surrounded the couple, their rifles aimed directly at Tulalok. Maria felt her world crumble. For months, she had lived in a bubble of happiness, temporarily forgetting the power her family held to destroy everything they touched. But now reality hit her with brutal force. She was still a Vasquez de Coronado, and that meant she would never truly be free while her family decided to claim her. "All right," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "I'll go with you." She turned to Tulalok, whose eyes showed a contained fury that threatened to explode. "If you truly love me," she whispered, "let me protect you. I'll find a way back to you, I promise." The journey back to the city was a nightmare of heat, dust, and tense silence. Maria rode among the soldiers like a prisoner, her mind racing as she frantically searched for an escape plan. Rodrigo rode beside her, casting occasional glances at her that mixed triumph with what could have been reluctant respect. "Does he really love you?" Rodrigo asked finally, when they were halfway to the city. "Or does he just use you because that's what they gave him?" Maria looked at him in surprise. It was the first personal question her brother had asked her in years. "He loves me," she replied with absolute certainty, "and I love him. He's the first man who's seen me as a whole person, not as a disappointment to be tolerated." Rodrigo remained silent for many minutes. "Father says you are going to be sent to the Sisters of Charity convent," he finally informed her. "He says your soul needs purification after all of this."
Maria had heard stories about that place. Troubled women from wealthy families were sent there to be reformed through years of prayer, penance, and total isolation from the outside world. It was a prison disguised as a religious institution. "And what do you think?" Maria asked, studying her brother's face. "Do you think I need purification?" Rodrigo hesitated before answering. "I think," he said slowly, "that you're the first person in our family who's found something real, something that isn't based on money, power, or appearances." He paused as though the next words were hard for him to say. "I think Father is jealous because you found what he never had, true love." Those unexpected words gave Maria the first spark of hope she had felt since the soldiers had arrived. If she had managed to touch something human in her brother's heart,
Maybe there was a chance that others in her family could see the truth as well. When they arrived at the family mansion at sunset, Don Patricio was waiting for them at the main gate, his expression grim. But when he saw his daughter dismount from the horse, his expression shifted to shock, exactly as it had with Rodrigo. The woman who returned was not the same one he had sent to the desert months ago. "Maria," he murmured, slowly approaching, "you look different." "I look like someone who has found her place in the world, someone who has learned to value herself." Don Patricio studied his daughter for a long moment. The changes were undeniable. She had lost weight, her posture was straighter, her skin glowed with health, and her eyes held a determination he had never seen in her before. But what disturbed him the most was the total absence of the submissiveness that had characterized all her previous years. "Tomorrow, you'll go to the convent," he declared finally, as if restoring his authority through the firmness of his voice. "The sisters will cleanse your soul of the pagan influences you've absorbed." "No," Maria answered simply. "I'm not going to the convent, and I won't let you destroy what I've built." The silence that followed was so deep that they could hear the night wind whispering through the trees in the garden. Don Patricio couldn't remember the last time anyone in his family had dared to defy him so directly. The war between Maria's past and future was about to begin. The news that Maria Vázquez de Coronado had returned from Apache captivity spread through Mexican high society like wildfire. By noon the following day, the family mansion was surrounded by curious onlookers hoping to see the woman who lived among savages for months. But their expectations of finding a traumatized victim vanished when Maria appeared on the main balcony, carrying a dignity that left the spectators speechless. Don Patricio called Father Sebastian, the head of the Sisters of Charity convent, to assess his daughter's spiritual state. The priest, a 60-year-old man used to dealing with rebellious women from wealthy families, arrived expecting resistance. What he didn't expect was to find a woman radiating inner peace that he himself envied. "My daughter," Father Sebastian began condescendingly, "I understand you've gone through a very difficult experience. Prolonged contact with pagans can corrupt the soul in ways that aren't always evident. At the convent, we will help purify your spirit through prayer and penance." I listened patiently before responding. "Father, with all due respect, my soul has never been purer than it is now. I've spent these months serving God by serving others, healing the sick and easing suffering. If that's corruption, then I don't understand what virtue means." Her words fell like stones in still water. Father Sebastian exchanged an uncomfortable glance with Don Patricio. They had expected to find a broken woman in need of salvation, not someone who spoke of her experience as a spiritual epiphany. "Furthermore," Maria continued with a firm voice, "I've decided that I'm not going to the convent. I found my true calling, and it's one I can best fulfill in freedom, not confined behind walls." Don Patricio stood up abruptly, his face turning red with fury. "You have no choice in this matter. You are my daughter, and as long as you live under my roof, you will obey my decisions." "Then I won't live under your roof," Maria replied calmly, her words steady and unshaken. "I'll leave tonight if necessary. I'd rather sleep under the stars as a free woman than in a gilded bed as a prisoner." The impact of her words resonated throughout the room. Doña Isabel, who had been silent, watching her daughter's transformation, finally spoke up. "Maria, what happened to you? You've never spoken like this in your life." "What happened, Mother," Maria said, turning to her with a mixture of compassion and firmness, "was that I finally learned to value myself. I learned that my worth doesn't depend on finding a husband you approve of or producing heirs to carry on the family name. My worth comes from what I can give to the world, from the lives I can touch and heal." It was in that moment that the sound of hooves approaching at a gallop broke the silence. Everyone turned toward the window, where a cloud of dust was rapidly drawing closer to the mansion. As the dust settled, it revealed the image that took everyone's breath away. Tlaloc riding his warhorse, but not alone. He was accompanied by a delegation of Apache warriors and several Mexican settlers whom Maria recognized as people she had treated medically. The Apache warrior dismounted with feline grace and walked directly toward the mansion's main entrance. His presence was commanding, wearing his finest war attire, but he had come in peace, as indicated by the white feathers in his hair. The warriors who accompanied him stayed mounted, forming a protective but non-threatening circle. Don Patricio stepped out onto the porch, flanked by several armed servants. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" he demanded, his voice trying to sound authoritative but betraying his nervousness. "I have come to claim my wife," Tlaloc declared in clear Spanish, his voice echoing through the courtyard. "I have come to claim the woman who freely chose to be with me and who was taken against her will." Maria appeared on the balcony, and when her eyes met Tlalo's, her heart seemed to expand, almost bursting with joy. "Tlaloc," she cried, and before anyone could stop her, she ran down the stairs into the courtyard. "Stop her!" Don Patricio roared, but it was too late.
Maria threw herself into Tlaloc's arms, who received her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "I thought I would never see you again," she murmured against his chest. "I promised I would find a way back to you," he replied, pulling her back just enough to study her face. "But I decided not to wait. I decided to come for you." One of the Mexican settlers stepped forward, an older man dressed simply but cleanly. "Mr. Vázquez de Coronado," he said respectfully but firmly, "my name is Miguel Herrera. This woman saved my granddaughter's life when the city doctors said there was no hope. My wife had terrible pain that no doctor could cure until she prepared the medicines that healed her completely." Other settlers stepped forward, each with similar stories. A young woman spoke of how Maria had helped with a difficult childbirth that saved both the mother and the baby. An elderly man described how she had cured an infection that had threatened to cost him his leg. Story after story piled up, painting the picture of a woman who had found her true calling in serving others. "This woman," continued Miguel Herrera, "is not a captive who needs rescue. This is a healer who has chosen to live among us because her heart is here. To separate her from her husband and her work would be a crime against God and humanity." Father Sebastián, who had been listening in silence, stepped forward slowly. His expression had completely changed during the testimonies. "Mr. Vázquez de Coronado," he said thoughtfully but firmly, "I've dedicated my life to serving God, and I can recognize a true calling when I see one. This woman has found her way to serve the Creator. To interfere with that would be to interfere with divine will." Don Patricio found himself in an impossible position. The evidence was overwhelming. His daughter had not only found happiness, but also found a purpose that touched and transformed lives. Doña Isabel slowly approached her daughter. For the first time in years, she truly looked at her, not as a disappointment to be tolerated, but as the extraordinary woman she had become. "My daughter," she murmured, tears in her eyes, "forgive me. I was so worried about what society would think that I never stopped to see what you needed." Maria embraced her mother, feeling a wound she had carried for years begin to heal. "I forgive you, Mother, but now my place is with my husband, serving those who need me." Tlaloc approached Don Patricio with solemn dignity. "Sir," he asked formally, "I ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. I promise to love her, protect her, and support her healing work for the rest of my days. I promise that together we will build something beautiful that honors both her heritage and mine." Don Patricio looked at his daughter, whose happiness shone brighter than he had ever seen during all his years in the family mansion. He looked at Tlaloc, whose love for Maria was evident in every gesture, in every look.
He looked at the people who had come to testify about the positive impact his daughter had had on their lives. Finally, with a voice that trembled slightly, he said, "You have my blessing." 5 years later, in a thriving community that had grown around the healing clinic Maria and Tlaloc had established, the couple watched the sunset from the porch of their home as their 2 young children played in the garden. The community had attracted families from diverse cultures who sought a place where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Maria, now a respected matron whose reputation as a healer spread throughout the region, leaned against her husband's shoulder with a smile of complete satisfaction. "Do you ever regret it?" asked Tlaloc, as he had many times over the years. "Never," she replied, watching their children run through the medicinal flowers they had planted together. "I found my place in the world. I found my purpose. I found true love. What more could I ask for?" In the distance, the sun set, painting the sky in gold and crimson, blessing a love story that had begun as punishment and transformed into the most beautiful gift.